The first time Henry saw her, he felt something familiar, but he didn't know why. She was sitting quietly beside him on the park bench, her hands resting gently in her lap, her eyes calm yet carrying something deeper. Henry glanced at her briefly, then looked away, unsure if he should say anything. His mind had been like this for a while now, filled with small gaps, missing pieces that never seemed to return. Some days he remembered things clearly. Other days, even simple moments felt distant, like they belonged to someone else's life. "It's a nice day," the woman said softly, breaking the silence. Henry nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yes, it is." His voice sounded uncertain, even to himself. There was something about her presence that felt strangely comforting, but also confusing. He studied her face again, trying to find a memory, a connection, something that made sense. But nothing came. The woman didn't seem surprised by his silence. Instead, she simply sat there, as if she had all the time in the world. After a moment, she turned toward him slightly. "My name is Margaret," she said gently. Henry hesitated before responding. "Henry," he replied. For a second, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't recognition. It wasn't memory. It was something else. Something quieter but just as real. Henry looked away again, feeling a strange mix of comfort and confusion. He didn't understand why this moment felt important. He didn't understand why sitting next to a stranger made him feel less alone. But for the first time in days, his thoughts slowed down, and the noise in his mind became a little quieter. The next day, Henry returned to the same bench without fully realizing why. It had become part of his routine, something his body remembered even when his mind struggled to keep up. The park looked the same as always, quiet and familiar, yet slightly distant, as if it existed just outside his understanding. He sat down slowly, his eyes scanning the area without expectation. But then he saw her again. The same woman, the same calm presence. She was already there, sitting in the exact same spot as before. Henry felt a small sense of relief he couldn't explain. "Hello, Henry," she said softly, as if they had known each other for years. He paused, surprised. "You remember my name?" he asked. She smiled gently. "Of course." Henry let out a quiet breath, though the confusion in his mind remained. "I'm sorry, I don't remember yours," he admitted. There was no embarrassment in his voice, only honesty. The woman nodded slightly, as if she had expected that answer. "Margaret," she repeated, her tone warm and patient. Henry repeated the name quietly to himself, trying to hold on to it this time. They sat together in silence for a while, watching people pass by. There was something peaceful about it, something that didn't require effort or explanation. After a few minutes, Henry spoke again. "Have we met before?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Margaret didn't answer immediately. She looked ahead, her expression calm but thoughtful. Then she turned toward him with the same gentle smile. "It feels like we have," she said. Henry nodded slowly, accepting the answer even though it didn't fully satisfy his question. Somehow it felt enough, because even without memory, something about her presence still felt like home. The days slowly turned into a routine neither of them questioned. Every afternoon, Henry found his way back to the same bench, and every afternoon, Margaret was already there, waiting without ever making it seem like she was. Their conversations remained simple, light, and often repeated, but there was a quiet comfort in that repetition. Henry would ask the same questions, and Margaret would answer them with the same patience, never correcting him, never showing that she had heard them before. One day, as they sat together watching the leaves fall gently around them, Henry turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Do you come here often?" he asked. Margaret smiled softly, a small sadness hidden behind her eyes. "Every day," she replied. Henry nodded, as if that made sense. Then he looked down at his hands, his fingers moving slightly as if trying to hold on to something invisible. "I feel like I should remember more," more," he said quietly. Margaret didn't interrupt. She simply listened. "Sometimes I feel like there's something missing," he continued, his voice softer now. "Like I've lost something important, but I don't know what it is." Margaret's gaze softened, her heart quietly carrying the weight of those words. She had heard them before many times, but they never became easier. She placed her hand gently near his, not touching at first, just close enough to be felt. "It's okay," she said calmly. "You're still here." Henry looked at her, his expression uncertain but comforted. He didn't understand why her words mattered so much, but somehow they did. In a mind filled with confusion, her presence remained the only thing that felt steady. One afternoon, the air felt colder than usual, and the park was quieter than before. Henry arrived a little later that day, his steps slower, his movements more uncertain. Margaret noticed immediately, though she didn't say anything at first. When he sat beside her, he seemed more distant, his eyes searching for something that wasn't there. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Henry hesitated before answering. "I don't know," he admitted. He looked around, as if the world itself had changed without him noticing. "Everything feels further away today." Margaret listened carefully, her heart tightening slightly. She had seen this before. The gaps in his memory were growing larger, the moments of clarity becoming shorter. Henry turned to her suddenly. "Have we met before?" he asked again, but this time his voice carried more urgency than confusion. Margaret paused just for a second, then she smiled softly, though her eyes reflected something deeper. "Yes," she said quietly, "many times." Henry stared at her, trying to understand, trying to connect something inside his mind that refused to stay in place. "Then why can't I remember you?" he asked, almost frustrated now. Margaret took a slow breath, her hand finally resting gently over his. "Because sometimes the mind forgets," she said softly, "but that doesn't mean everything is gone." Henry looked down at their hands, his expression slowly changing. He didn't recognize the memory, but he felt something warm, something safe, and for a moment that feeling mattered more than remembering. The routine continued, but something had changed. Henry's questions came more frequently now, and the moments of confusion lasted longer than before. Margaret noticed every detail, even the ones he didn't realize himself. One afternoon, as they sat together, Henry looked at her with a different kind of expression, something closer to curiosity than confusion. "Why do you come here every day?" he asked. Margaret smiled gently, though her eyes softened with emotion. "Because you're here," she replied. Henry frowned slightly, trying to understand. "But why me?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried a weight that made the moment feel heavier. Margaret took a slow breath before answering. "Because you matter to me," she said quietly. Henry looked down, processing her words in silence. There was something about them that felt important, even if he couldn't fully explain it. "I wish I could remember," he said after a moment, his voice almost apologetic. Margaret shook her head slightly. "You don't have to," she replied. Henry looked at her again, his expression softer now. "But I feel like I've forgotten something big," he admitted. Margaret's hand gently tightened around his. "You haven't forgotten everything," she said softly. Henry studied her face carefully, as if trying one last time to find something familiar. His mind remained uncertain, but his heart responded differently. "I don't remember you," he said slowly. Then, after a brief pause, he added something that made her breath catch. "But I feel like I trust you." Margaret smiled, but this time a tear slipped quietly down her cheek, because even without memory, something inside him still remembered her. The following days became quieter, softer, as if time itself had slowed down around them. Henry spoke less now, and when he did, his words were simpler, often repeating themselves. But Margaret stayed, just as she always had, sitting beside him, sharing the silence without ever leaving. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a warm light across the park, Henry turned to her once again. His eyes were calmer now, less restless serious than before. Have we met before? He asked softly. Margaret looked at him, her expression gentle, filled with both love and sadness. She could have answered the same way she always did. She could have kept the truth hidden behind simple words, but this time felt different. Yes, she said quietly. Henry waited as if expecting more. Margaret took a slow breath, her voice steady despite the emotion in her chest. I'm your wife. The words settled into the silence between them. Henry didn't react immediately. He simply looked at her, searching her face one more time. There was no sudden memory, no recognition in his eyes, but something else appeared instead, something deeper. He reached out slowly and held her hand, his grip gentle but certain. I don't remember that, he said honestly. Margaret nodded, accepting it without hesitation. Then Henry looked at her again, his expression calm, almost peaceful. But I think I loved you, he added quietly. Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she smiled through them, because in that moment she realized something she had always hoped was true. Even when memory fades, real love doesn't disappear. It stays quietly, somewhere deeper than the mind can forget.